Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joey's Retro Handhelds. I'm Joey, and today I have 6 quick tips and tricks for your AYN Odin 2 portal to just improve your portal life. And don't worry, these tips aren't like just, hey, you should push power to turn on the device. No, these are actually sort of advanced types of tips and tricks for the most part. And a lot of this will actually apply to older Odins, and Odin 2s, and Retroid devices too, for the most part. So let's jump right in. Tip number 1, per app settings. Did you know that you can set your controller style? So if you want to use Xbox controls, Odin controls, or disconnect, your performance mode, like normal, performance, or high performance, and your fan mode, like quiet, smart, or sport, on a per app basis and have it save? Well, you can, and it's actually easy. Go ahead and first swipe down from the top and scroll over to floating icon and enable it. Then go ahead and open any app that you want to do this for. So let me just use Artemis, for example, because that's what I use for streaming, and personally, I want that to be different than any other app. Slide out the panel from the right, which is the floating icon panel, and take a look at the bottom right, and you're going to see Gamepad, Follow Global, which is the performance modes, and Follow Global again, which is the fan. If you tap on Gamepad, you can see options for what to set, and this is only going to apply to this app. So for me, I want Artemis to use Xbox controls, and I want analog triggers. If I go ahead and tap the next one, since I'm streaming, I can stay in normal mode for performance. I don't need much power here. Lastly, you can now see that I can edit the fan mode, and I'm just going to put it in smart, and I'm going to let Odin manage it all for me. If you swipe down from the top, you can see that while we're in this app, some options are now unable to be changed because we have them locked and set. Then, when you exit out of the app and you swipe down, you can now make changes to your global settings, and this will apply to anything that you didn't set up per app settings for. And then you can see if we pop back into Artemis, it all changes to my Artemis profile. Now, one thing that doesn't change visually in the swipe down menu is the controller style, but you're going to notice that it is using Xbox controls because A on the device is the actual button on the controller. So it's all swapped. It's just visually, for some reason, it's not changing it in the drop-down menu. This is super powerful and super helpful. Go ahead and customize a few emulators and streaming apps and other apps, and you don't really need to touch any of this manually ever again. But this all leads me into my next tip, and it is the transparent floating icon. You might have realized that I didn't tell you to turn off floating icon, and you absolutely can after setting up all of your per app settings. It doesn't need to be enabled. But what if you still want it to exist, but you just don't want to see that line because it's ugly in every game? Swipe down, head to floating icon, and you see that little arrow that's on the right of it? Tap it. You should now see a pop-up with floating icon transparency, and go ahead and swipe it all the way to 0. Now open an app, and you should see that it's gone. But if you swipe in from the right, it is still there. Perfection. Tip number 3 is using charging separation. So for those of you that aren't aware, the Odin 2 portal has a feature called charging separation, which basically lets you charge the device directly, and it bypasses the battery. So it helps you avoid overcharging or charging unnecessarily, heat generation, and a lot more, because it just powers the device instead of charging the battery, which then powers the device. So swipe down from the top and enable charging separation. This is actually very useful for those of you that want to dock the handheld. It'll save your battery in the long run, and I would definitely turn this on if you are docking. Tip number 4 is making use of those back buttons. There is 2 back buttons on the portal, and maybe you want to use them. Head to Android settings, Odin settings, scroll down to M1 and M2 key mapping. Now, if you tap either of them, you're going to get a list of options to map the back buttons to. Maybe you want another home and back button, or easily switch apps. Or I've also heard some people use them for face buttons for easier spamming. The world is your oyster here, but this is where you can set all of that. Honestly, I would love more freedom to put anything I want to these back buttons, but we do have a decent amount of options. Tip number 5 is FPS Calibration. So with the most recent over-the-air update for the portal, AYN added the ability to calibrate your screen refresh rate because they are shipping from the factory and they aren't super calibrated. So it's a few hertz off of being a perfect 60 hertz or a perfect 120 hertz. So let's go ahead and fix that by going into the Android settings, Odin settings, enter factory test, click OK, and scroll down to FPS calibration. Go ahead and click auto calibration to let it do its thing. Now, unfortunately, it seems like as of today, this reverts on shutdown, but I can imagine that would probably be fixed in a future update, or at least I hope so. The reason you would want to do this is to avoid any weird stuttering or games not playing properly, as you want the screen to be as close to 60 Hz or 120 Hz as possible, which avoids all issues. I guess while we're here, a hidden tip, or not really a tip at all, but never use anything besides 120 Hz on this device. You didn't buy this device to use 60 Hz. Keep that baby at 120. It doesn't change anything, trust me. All your games are going to play perfectly. Keep that baby at 120. It looks great. You never want to move off of that. Tip number 6 is buy the grip and also the bigger stick caps. My last tip is the only one that's going to cost you money, but I think both of these things are absolutely worth it. The first is the grip. And I think that it is a must-have purchase with the caveat that if you're like me, you probably will cut off the top because that's what I did. The top is annoying to use the buttons with, and so I just ended up cutting it off. But if you do, you will have a great grip with no negatives. It just might not look super sexy. Depends on how good you are at cutting. And if you're like me, you're not that good, but I didn't mind. It still looks great. The second part is buying the bigger stick caps. Now, it doesn't involve opening your device or anything like that. You can easily just pop off the stick caps and slide the new ones on, and it is a massive, massive improvement in my opinion, and I would highly, highly suggest that you do it. That is all I have for you today. Like I said, 6 quick tips to help you enjoy your portal a little bit more. Maybe some things that you weren't aware of, hopefully. Otherwise, this video just bombed because everybody knew these things. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow. Come join me on the Discord to talk all about handhelds. Support me on Patreon if you like my stuff. And hope you all have a good one.